Hello, everyone. Joining us today, an American journalist, Jackson Gosnell, to talk about the 2024 presidential race. Thank you for making the time.
Thanks. Great to be with you.
I'll get started with, 2024 is approaching, and as an observer, the 2024 presidential race just seems to get more unpredictable, with new big names joining in and new obstacles for candidates to overcome. So I guess I want to start with, do you see a third-party candidate come out and try to make history by defeating Republicans and Democrats in 2024? And I mean a serious third-party candidate who can actually make ground in the polls.
Well, I think they try to each and every election cycle, but it never happens. I mean, the harsh reality is that America is a two-party system. And while, a lot of other countries don't do the same thing, and even our own political leaders have argued against it, that's the way that it is. Americans are believing this idea that it's Republicans and Democrats, and that's pretty much it. And I think until there is a major cultural movement to shift away from that, it'll always be that case. So I find it highly unlikely that a third-party candidate would break enough ground in the near future, perhaps even in the next few decades, over your Republican and Democratic candidates.
Okay. How big are the odds of a candidate that is currently running in the race? Like, I mean, if they lose the primaries, could they run independently? How big are the odds that a candidate, if they lost, would run against the two nominees?
I think it would be a last-ditch effort of I didn't win the nomination for the party, but I still want to run, and I'm so committed to this that I'm going to then file to run as something else, which I don't even know if you can do that in some states because there's cutoffs on when you can actually get on the ballot and sign up to do that. But I think that would be a last-ditch effort, and I don't know that it would ultimately be effective.
Okay, and in Canada, we can have up to a six major party system, and it has been years since a political party has reached 50% of the vote in an election. So do you think if the same scenario were to occur in the United States, I mean, not six parties, but even a third party, would there be a lot of vote splitting, and would it just open up the doors for a candidate to cruise to victory?
I think it would, but it's going to be a long time before we see that. And I know people go on television and argue that it could happen all the time, and it could, but again, the reality is that Americans have lived their lives in a two-party system to this point, and it will likely continue for years to come. So I think it's very unlikely that that will change anytime soon. Now, if it did change, then certainly it's a possibility. I mean, if people who are children now grow up and there's four parties or so, then they're going to automatically believe there's four parties and they're going to pick the best from those four. But because everybody knows about a two-party system now, that's just the way that it is. That's the way it has been, and that's the way it will likely continue to be.
Okay, and President Joe Biden is being challenged by two candidates right now in the Democratic primary. And do you think history will be made and President Biden will be defeated? Because I know there's not many, I don't even know if there's a debate planned, but there's a lot of controversy around President Biden, even within the Democratic Party. And those candidates running against him are not getting much media coverage. So do you think there could be any historical movement in the Democratic primary?
It's an interesting question. And just as I've told you that the multiple party system is probably not going to happen because it's never happened, well, this has never happened, a sitting president having opponents, and it has never happened that the opponents of a sitting president who is up for re-election gets the nomination over the person who's currently in office. And I probably don't see it happening, honestly, but I will say Marianne Williamson and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. have a lot of support. And this is something to watch. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is really polling quite high, especially for somebody who's running in a party against someone who is a sitting president. So it's unprecedented. I'm not going to say it's not going to happen at all. I would say that this has come a lot further than what it was maybe 10 years ago if you were to see the same thing. No one would have ever thought it possible. And now a lot of people don't like Biden, even his own party and members of it. A lot of Americans don't think he's mentally sharp enough to be president. So, it's never happened before. Could it happen? Quite possibly. And there's a lot of support for both of those candidates. We'll have to see how it plays out. Probably not, but it may happen.
Okay, and I haven't got the chance to look at many polls, so and I don't know if many of our viewers have either. So can you describe with the Democratic primary, is Joe Biden like, is it close between him and Robert F. Kennedy, or does Robert F. Kennedy still have a lot of ground to gain through debates and through fundraising in order to get to the close mark?
Well, to be quite honest with you, a sitting president is always going to be favored by the convention of that candidate. So, for example, the DNC is really pushing President Biden and will do that because he is the sitting president. But it's important to note that while he is currently the most favored out of all the polls, obviously he's the president, everybody knows what they get with him at this point. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is not too far behind. He still has some ground to cover, but not terribly far, to be honest with you. I think that in most instances where this were to happen, for example, if I were to be a president and I'm a Democrat, as Biden is, and I'm running for re-election, I'm all but guaranteed the nomination, right? It's almost certainly, you have it in the bag, it's going to happen. It's not 100% guaranteed, but very high chance that he has it in the bag. But I think the Biden campaign is actually worried about these other two because of the amount of momentum that they're getting, and all the people, are really embracing Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Marianne Williamson. So I think it's definitely cause for concern. Yes, they still have ground to cover, and ultimately it'll have to be decided if they become the nominee, which is probably not going to happen, but it could happen. And I think that now more than ever, there is more support for these other candidates to certainly have the president worried.
Okay, and this could be a deciding factor too. Is President Biden in a good position in the polls to defeat the Republican nominee who's likely to be President Donald J. Trump?
I don't know, but what I can tell you is that during the Trump administration, there were lower prices, right? You didn't have inflation really bad. You didn't have the high gas prices. And while Americans, they may care about abortion and Donald Trump doesn't care about abortion, I think that Americans are prioritizing what hits their pocketbook and their wallets the most. And so if we look at the economy, President Trump had a very strong economy, and President Biden's economy has been kind of all over the place with record-breaking inflation, high prices, etc. And while Biden offers a more democratic agenda as far as policy with climate change and abortion access and all these things, a lot of people seem to prioritize the economy. They know what they get with Trump. They see that when we had Biden as president, stuff started to get more expensive. So I think it's highly plausible that the Republicans could, I should say, beat President Biden just over the economy alone, because I don't think policy matters as much when people are struggling to pay for their groceries. So we'll see how it pans out. As you mentioned, a lot of Democrats even don't like President Biden, so his own party. And mental acuity has been a really big question in all of this, because the president gets confused a lot. And I mean, certainly it's a stressful job, right? He's the president of the United States, a big job, but he doesn't show the same, I guess, mental state that other presidents have that are very sharp and in tune and on top of things. And I think that's another deciding factor for voters. Look, Trump is very controversial. He is somebody who has been indicted numerous times, is probably about to be indicted again. There was an impeachment surrounding him at one point. So he's a very controversial figure who comes with a lot of baggage. But I think if Americans ultimately believe he can help their wallets, then they may choose him again.
Okay, and you mentioned on this in your answer there, but you said that many people in the Democratic Party oppose President Biden. So going back to the third party idea, many hard Democrats probably would not just switch Republican and vote for President Trump just because they don't like Biden. So would they look for a third party alternative? Because I know there is third parties. There's a Green Party, Libertarian. So would they look for a third party candidate, or would they just not vote?
I think they would probably just not vote, because in America, the third party candidate hardly ever succeeds. And that is really unfortunate, because there should be more options than a Republican and a Democrat. I mean, a lot of people argue a lot, like, really, these are the best choices that you can put up, Donald Trump and Joe Biden, come on. And so I think it's a shame that more people don't embrace the third party candidate, but also the reality is that they just simply won't have the support, or at least that's been historically true, that the support is just not there. So I think people would be more inclined to sit at home and not vote than go to the polls and vote for a third party candidate who they know is not going to win.
All right, Jackson Gosnell, American journalist, thank you for making the time.
Great to be with you. Thanks.